That's right. That's what I do. And I present it really simply. Here's a pie chart. Here's a bar chart. I've got detailed exhibits that go on for pages and pages, but they're all summarized in those pictorial diagrams. And if you can do that with a picture or a pie chart or something, that simplifies it for people.
Today, I'm speaking with Mark Ellwood. Mark is a productivity consultant. His most recent book, The Poetic Path to Getting More Done, and he's got a website, getmoredone.com. Mark, could you please introduce yourself? Let people know just a little more about you, please.
Well, thanks for being here, Ed. I'm a productivity consultant, as you said. A little while back, I invented a small electronic device called a TimeCorder. For those who are watching, it looks like this, and it allows you to track how you spend your time working on different activities. So I lend that out to employees. They really enjoy using these to track their own time. I analyze the results and show organizations how their employees can get an extra hour per day to spend on their top priority activities.
Well, we all need a new device that gives us an hour a day more for each of us. That would be excellent, Mark. Uh, what did you start doing this for? Tracking time. What got you into that?
Well, there's a lot of specialists and experts out there who said, my life was really in shambles. I was struggling. I didn't know anything. And that was the case for me. I was 11 years old. So back when I was 11, I started delivering newspapers. And maybe lots of your audience doesn't know much about that business, but we would go to a depot and 7 or 8 of us, and all the papers would get delivered there. And then we'd gather them up and then take them in our bags and deliver them to people's houses or apartments. Well, on the weekend, the newspaper always came with a colored magazine insert. They were published separately, and you had to put the inserts inside the newspapers to deliver them together. And so I watched these other guys and they'd kind of struggle and put this piece here and open that up there. And I thought, this is classic time and motion stuff. Well, not that I knew that term at the time, but I thought, how could I do this faster? So organizing the work, the magazines and the paper and the completed pile was important to me to figure out how I could do that as fast as possible. Well, I learned lots of other things as a newspaper boy as well. So, for instance, uh, lugging a lot around those big heavy bags, I thought, let's invest in technology. So I bought a wagon, and it's much easier to take the papers around and deliver them on a wagon than by hand. You also get into what's called operations research, how you organize tasks and how things happen. So imagine this. You're dragging the wagon up one side of the street, but you got to deliver papers to the other side of the street. So do you take one with you and then come back? Or do you take two or three? And so that was a fascinating exercise for me to figure out what's the fastest way with, I guess, the shortest number of steps. Another thing you could do is you could fold the papers up. You've seen kids in movies tossing papers at people's houses from bikes. So you can fold the papers up. It takes 3 seconds or 4 seconds, and then walk and throw the paper. Or there is a way to throw a newspaper underhand with the paper not folded, and you can kind of toss it up and hopefully it would slide into somebody's door. So, okay, so you've got to make some calculations there. Do I fold the papers, or just do I save steps, or do I throw them by hand? So all that was thinking about productivity. And then on my last paper route, I had about 130 customers, and I had to go and collect every week from them. You got to knock on someone's door on Tuesday night. Hi, it's Mark from the paper. I'm collecting. And it occurred to me that was taking a lot of time. So I divided the route in half. I went to half of the people on weeks 1 and 3, and half of them on weeks 2 and 4. And instead of collecting for 1 week, I collected for 2 weeks at a time. And I could manage my cash flow, and that worked fine. So that was kind of batching tasks together. So all these different approaches got me thinking about productivity. There was one other. Some of the people paid at the office, so to speak. So everyone does that today, right? You pay electronically. And I suppose in retrospect, I might have encouraged more customers to pay directly at the office. I wouldn't have had to knock on their door. But by knocking on doors, you got better tips. So there's a bit of a trade off there. Um, and so all these things were getting me to think about productivity. I mean, I didn't consider myself an expert at the time. I was just trying to figure out how to deliver the papers quickly. And so maybe that's my origin story. Many years later, I'll just continue briefly. Uh, in the corporate life, I was in a meeting and everybody was late. And I thought, oh man, we're spending a lot of time here waiting for everybody to show up. Boy, if you add up your time and his and hers and mine, and I just had this kind of aha moment that you could measure that and have a little device, and boy, you can measure meeting time and waiting and paperwork and so on. So the aha went off about developing the TimeCorder, which is kind of like a chess clock in reverse. You got two clocks that tick down the time. Instead, you're ticking up the time, you're adding it up. And instead of two, you've got 25 or 30 or whatever. So that was the aha moment for the TimeCorder device to continue my journey of trying to be more productive with the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really like the idea of this time coder device that you put together. The big question is in today's world, we use a phone for everything, and everyone wants to know why it's not an app instead of the coder device that you hand out.
Yep. Well, I can tell you, I launched the device way before any of these smartphones or apps. I mean, originally 1989 with the previous version, and it turned out to be the world's most popular product that everybody thought somebody else should buy. So I originally targeted for lawyers, and I went to them and said, not quite right for us. Maybe you should talk to accountants because that's going to really work for their business. So we did a test. In fact, it was on national TV, and people were trying the device. And it turned out they said, independent consultants are really going to like this. So I went to the independent consultants and they said, have you talked to the lawyers yet? So it was a big circle. So I pivoted, and instead of trying to sell the device, I lend it out and use it as a consulting tool. It's much more profitable that way. But you asked about the app. Well, we did a project for the Ontario government here in Canada a while back. I teamed up with Price Waterhouse Coopers, and we would not have got anywhere close to winning that contract had we had a downloadable app. These are union people, and they were really concerned about the anonymity of the studies, which we promise, and asking them to take your personal phone and download Mark Ellwood's app thing on it, where he's got access to your phone and all your data. That just wouldn't have gone over. So they really liked the idea that it was a separate device. In fact, the funniest story I tell is when we first presented it to them, we had already won the contract, PricewaterhouseCoopers and myself, but we presented to them, and I just had to show them how it worked. And the union person said, that little list of activities you've got there, could you make the font a little bit bigger? And I thought, okay, fine, we're good with that. So it turns out that worked really well. There's other reasons besides privacy. The TimeCorder is always on. Your phone is not always on. It's giving you constant feedback. The batteries will last 200 hours. Your phone has to get charged in 7 or 8 hours. And so you got to take it away and charge it and so on. Our device is always constantly giving you feedback. It's measuring the stuff you're doing on your phone, and it's ergonomically simple. On your phone, you'd have to pull up the app and scroll through and this and that, whatever. The TimeCorder device is just slightly less complicated to use than a doorbell. So doorbell, you never did it ring or not? But the TimeCorder gives you audio, tactile, and visual feedback. You can see that it's on, that's ticking away. People really like it, and mostly because we promise anonymity. And so when you get people involved, when you get them to help create this list of activities, when you tell them you're going to measure all this non-value added stuff that's slowing them down, then they say, oh, okay, good, and promise anonymity. So I don't use any individuals' names in any of our reports. In some of our recent studies, I didn't even know who the people were at all. I just had to use code numbers. So that's what encourages them to get keen. And I work part-time as a ski instructor on the weekends, and they're pushing hard for us to fill out our employee satisfaction surveys, and they're getting up to maybe 70 or 80%. And that's a stretch because they're really pushing hard. This, we get a participation rate with the TimeCorder device of 94%. People really like using it because it gives them feedback and they can see what's going on. So that's kind of unheard of for employee surveys. And so when you give them one of these to use, they like it. It's fun. It's simple, and that's how it works.
So, what type of activities do employers like to track to make sure their time is managed properly?
I think I've measured more than just about any other person on the planet. I have a database of 3,000 activities. Now, some of them are kind of similar to each other. Calling about a mortgage renewal, calling about a loan renewal, and so on. Those are sort of similar. Um, but the activities really are two major categories. One, what are the things you need to be doing in your job? What are your most important priorities? And two, what is everything else? The administrative tasks, personal time, dealing with complaints, whatever. So we're trying to see, how do we get people to focus on what's important, and what are those things? Some people call them time wasters. I don't. They're just necessary parts of the job, but they're the less important or the non-value added tasks.
Interesting. So, how did the app come up? Or it's not an app. See, here I am modernizing you, Mark. How does this device get put together? It had to be a process to come up with this. Did you have a team of engineers help you with this, or how did that come about?
Kind of, yes. I mean, I sometimes call myself an inventor, but inventors tend to be a little outside of the norm. But I guess I invented it. So first, I had this idea. I mean, again, the sort of chess clock in reverse, and so that was sort of already an idea that was out there. But then I had to figure, okay, well, how do I build this thing? So I found an engineer, an old buddy of mine, who built the two prototypes for me, and then we had another engineer further modify those. I had an industrial designer. Those are people who figure out, what does this container look like? How does everything fit together? And a graphic designer design, what the graphics look like. But there's also the user interface. That was me. I'd sit around with a pad at night thinking, okay, you push this button and then that happens. So it's real simple. You just push one button and it begins tracking your time. But we needed a couple of other buttons. If you needed to make a manual adjustment, okay, what would the series of button pushes for that look like? What if you wanted to scroll through and look at how you're spending your time on all these different activities? So there are only, well, 8 other sort of function buttons, but I wanted to keep that to a minimum. It occurred to me, I used to go to trade shows and watching people on computers and say, look at our computer program or an app or whatever. And they go, well, you simply push this and just add that. And the words simply and just were always worrisome to me, because the person who developed this thing, they eat, drink, and sleep with the thing, and they know it inside out, and they really know how to work it well. Whereas I thought, no, people haven't used this device. You've got to make it dead simple for them. Turn it on, push one button, and it's tracking your time. Now, there's a list of activities that's corresponding to those letters of the alphabet, so we give that to people as well. So I used to say you could learn to use it in about 5 seconds, and then there's doing some of the manual adjustments that takes a little longer. But you've got to make it simple. And so you look at Amazon, they've tried to, get rid of all those sort of impediments. They've done that well. But there's a lot of products and services out there where you have to press a whole bunch of buttons and things. Um, and I've seen people complaining about that recently. It was Bill Maher on his late night show talked about a valet app. So he's parking his car at a restaurant and he wants to go retrieve his car. Well, you got to download the app and create a password and an account number and this and that. He goes, I just want to get my car back. And we've seen that with many other types of apps that complicate things. Sure, you're gathering data. Sure, it's in a secure space and you can analyze that data, but it's got to be kept simple. And so, with the TimeCorder device, I think we got it by experimenting a little bit, by doing some of those thought experiments. We kept the we kept it simple to use and giving instant feedback and uncomplicated. Early on, when I tried to sell it to lawyers and that didn't work, they said, well, we needed to do this and we needed to do that. And I thought, if you add up all of those features that they wanted, it's going to get way too complicated. Think about the stuff you use, Microsoft Office. There's lots and lots of functions on there people don't know how to use. And I suppose for the power users, that's great, but you've got to keep it simple. And Apple did that with their products by keeping the user interface simple.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So, what's the acceptance rate from the employees when they take on this study from the employer? How do they feel about it?
Yep. Well, that's the number I mentioned early, 94%. So if we give out 100 devices, yeah, 94 will come back with high quality, detailed data. The other six, maybe somebody just didn't start for some reason because they were about to leave or quit or maternity leave or something. Sometimes in that six, you can make manual adjustments, and people just make way too many manual adjustments or they do them incorrectly. And so I've got some algorithms to show me, maybe I shouldn't keep that data and just put it aside. But 94% is pretty amazing. And people are tracking hundreds of activities over the course of 2 weeks when we normally do the studies. So yeah, every time they come back, I'm surprised at how detailed people were with their tracking.
Some of the information that you've accumulated over the years is pretty interesting. The fact that women are better at time management than men is one of those facts. How did you come up with that fact, and how much data did it take to compile to ultimately decide this is factual?
So I go to conferences every year or so, the International Association of Time Use Research. These are a lot of academics and people working for government operations, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, among others. And they do a lot of studies of time use. And so what we found out is across a large number of typically Western countries at home and domestically, women are more responsible for domestic chores than men. So that's childcare, cooking, cleaning, shopping, and a couple of others. And so I thought, well, how does it look like in the workplace? And so those time studies don't tend to get that granular as I do in the workplace. So I thought, well, let's see if there's differences. So I have a database because I've been gathering all this data for, well, 35 years. And I thought, okay, it's 500,000 hours of data from dozens and dozens of corporations and thousands of individuals who've done this. So all the way along, I knew my database was going to be of some value. So I have a lot of different analyses that I'm able to look at. So I'm working for this client, but I can compare their results to that client. So looking across the whole database, I first decided, well, let's split it in two. Let's have a men database and a women one. So I did that by names. Susan is a woman, Samuel is a man, and I had to go through all the names and kind of sort them because I had people's names. We don't give them back to the clients, but nonetheless, I had them. Where I didn't have names, I just put that data aside. So I started to look at what are the differences. And I concluded, as you mentioned, that women are better at managing their time than men. There were four major findings, and we can go through those if you like, one at a time to explain how I came up with that conclusion.
Sure. We'd love to hear that, Mark.
Well, let's start with the first one. First, I discovered that women worked fewer hours per week than men. Now, these are knowledge workers. They're people like sales reps and managers and customer service reps and construction supervisors and so on. But they're largely working in offices. It's not people on the retail. I've done a few retail studies, or they're not manufacturing jobs. And I include personal time because if you go to the office, well, you're there at the office, and whether you eat in the food court or the cafeteria or at your desk, you're still there. And similarly, for people working from home, we count personal time as well. So if you add all that up, it's about 46 hours per week. So personal is only about 3 hours per week. So women are at 45 hours, men are at 48 hours, and that's the total number of hours. And you say, well, why is that? Well, guess who's got to get home to pick people up, children up from daycare and cook dinner and so on. So that was the first of the findings. The second one is a little more complex. If you read time management books, they always talk about working on your most important activities, but they don't really define what those are. Stephen Covey talked about his important urgent matrix, which is called the Eisenhower matrix. It wasn't really President Eisenhower. He was, in fact, quoting a university dean who had come up with that urgent, important idea. And then Eisenhower continued it, and Covey popularized it. So you want to work on so-called quadrant two. Those are your important but not urgent activities compared to urgent but important and so on. So important but not urgent. And so again, Covey didn't really define those. I thought, well, maybe I can. Turns out, before we do our time studies, we ask people, what are the most important things you need to do in your job? I thought, that's it. Okay, I'll use that. So if you ask sales reps, they'll tell you processing orders and taking care of customers and dealing with complaints. But the number one item is prospecting for new business. I thought, okay, that's the most important activity, not urgent, for sales reps. So I looked at about a dozen different jobs and mapped all those for those different jobs. And then thought, okay, well, how are they spending their time? If prospecting is what you're saying you need to do as a sales rep, or managing and coaching employees is what you say you should do as a manager, how is your time compared to that? So across the whole database, I looked at that and found out, and this is key, the average is only 20%. So for top priority activities, people are only spending 20% of their time. That sounds like that number, that Pareto number, 20-80 rule. It's not. That's a little bit different. It's just coincidental that the number's the same. Turns out for women, it's 22%, and men are only at 18%. So women are working fewer hours, and within those hours, they're spending a higher percentage of their time on their top priority activities. And there you go.
That's very interesting, Mark. So, all of this data sifting is very complicated for so many people. They don't even like to look at data. So, when you're compiling these reports for people, you're the one that actually is sifting through, and the client doesn't necessarily have to get their hands dirty with all of the complicated data sets.
That's right. That's what I do. And I present it really simply. Here's a pie chart. Here's a bar chart. I've got detailed exhibits that go on for pages and pages, but they're all summarized in those pictorial diagrams. And if you can do that with a picture or a pie chart or something, that simplifies it for people. And so that's my job, is to use my different tools to analyze that. I've got 3 or 4 different analytical tools to look at all that data. You got to keep it simple for people. I guess also, I don't know where or when, but I got this idea that science is important, that data is important. And so if you look at a lot of popular speakers or trainers, they talk about, in my area, time management, but it could be leadership and communication skills. And they kind of say things that make some sense. And maybe that's based on personal experience or observations or whatever. But if you can root it in real data, that to me is the better way to go, because there's just a higher credibility layer there. It's science rather than stuff that I made up. And again, you go on LinkedIn, for instance, you hear people talking about all kinds of ideas. I think it's not really true in terms of based on data. So that's the way I like to approach the world.
So who should be using this type of technology to perfect their organizations?
Well, I can say anyone should. Um, I've come to a kind of a new conclusion that kind of pulls the rug out of a lot of what I've been saying. But organizations have kind of gotten a free ride from their employees, certainly knowledge workers. Hourly paid workers, when someone works extra, you pay them extra, either just an extra hour or two, or maybe a time and a half for overtime. So there's a real cost there. But when you look at workers, your managers, for instance, and maybe they're sort of contracted for like 42 hours per week is sort of typical, and that includes lunch and whatnot. So okay, we want you there from 9 to 5, and if you show up at noon, well, you're going to get a talking to, but come in between 9 to 5 or the equivalent 8 to 4. But if they stay longer, nobody says anything. They stay longer because they want to get promoted, because they enjoy the work. Some people don't want to go home, and they really embrace that, and that's terrific. But corporations are getting a free ride from that. So, as I mentioned, the average is not 40 hours per week; it's 46 hours, and people are working longer than that. Managers, for instance, tend to be around 49 hours. So corporations are getting free labor from those from those knowledge workers. The problem is that free labor ends up turning into resentment or bad morale or stress, or problems at home because they're not getting home on time. So there's a huge cost to that in terms of turnover and retention and so on. But for the most part, corporations are saying, well, this is great. Having said that, for those who realize that productivity is important, this is where this kicks in. So, all right, your people are working 40 or 45 or 50 hours per week, but they're spending 20 hours on that non value added work. Wouldn't you want to reduce that so that your knowledge workers can spend their highest amount of time, whether it's overtime or not, on their highest priority activities? So, this is a diagnostic tool. Now, it's interesting, during COVID, there were all kinds of employee monitoring software and apps and so on that came out, and people didn't like that. So they were tracking keystrokes, or they were tracking websites you visited. If somebody's working on Word, well, are they writing a note to their friend or their wedding invitation or a thank you note, or are they doing a report or doing something important that you want them to do? So just tracking the type of program they're using doesn't give you all that many indications. Now, for websites, okay, if you go to an educational website, you're using that. Whereas it's of a shopping site, well, clearly that's not what you're supposed to be doing. But nonetheless, the employees found these systems kind of they were intrusive, and they didn't know what was going on, and it was kind of making employees wrong for working at home. I don't care about that stuff. There will be some personal time, and we measure that just to keep people in the rhythm of using the device. But if they're shopping or calling their daycare, it really doesn't matter to me, because it's how much time you're spending on those important activities. That's that counts the most. And we don't use employee names. So this whole world of measurement got kind of a bad rap with those COVID measuring tools. And so I'm not in that world at all. I'm just doing quick 2 week studies that diagnose where that non value added time is going. So lots of corporations could benefit from it. Individuals could as well. The challenge is getting people over that hump of wanting to actually analyze where they are.
Yeah, and even though a lot of people feel that's intimidating, it can actually save you a lot of time, and time is money, and money can do a lot of things. So it's interesting what you've done, Mark. So your book, The Poetic Path to Getting More Done, it's poems, poetry. Could you tell us about this?
Yes. Well, a while back, tweets were quite short, and I realized I could do a rhyming couplet in a tweet when the shorter 140 characters existed. So I did some rhyming tweets, and I thought, well, let's do a book about this because I've written poetry for ages. Um, I haven't sold many copies. I don't know if Amazon even has it, but nonetheless, I quote those at workshops and I give out copies and so on. Because if you're going to if you're going to learn about goal setting, why not do it with a little bit of a poem rather than just somebody lecturing at you? So it's not grabbed all over the world, but nonetheless, I'm proud of those poems. You mentioned measuring a moment ago, and it seems to me that there are three areas of our lives where there's kind of an embarrassment factor that kicks in. And so one of them is finances. You mentioned time's money, finances, right? And you get people saying, "Oh, I don't know. I don't want to know where I spend all my money. My credit card's over and I'm paying this and that." And there's this sort of embarrassment about finances. We know where we need to be, but we're not taking those steps to getting there. The second one is body image. Oh, I ate a whole bucket of ice cream last night. I'm overweight or I'm not in shape or whatever. And people know what they want to do to have a healthy life, but they're not always taking those steps. In both of those cases, measuring makes sense. For the finances, measure how you spent your money last week, and you're going to learn some things about how much you spend on coffee, for instance, every day. And for body image, whether it's weight or how fast you can run a half marathon or how many push-ups you can do, it doesn't matter. But getting some measurements can help us diagnose where we want to be. You can measure your heart rate. You can measure your oxygen intake. And so finally, the third one is this one, time management. Oh, I waste my time. Don't tell me I know I waste my time. Yeah, but you said you want to spend more time with your family. You said you wanted to get a promotion. So why not measure what's going on? So in each of those three areas, and I'm not in the weight loss business, but nonetheless, get some data, measure your own time, and whether you use a TimeCorder or just a piece of paper doesn't matter. But get some data so you can say, oh, that's what's going on. Here's where I want to be, and here's where I am, and I can make the adjustments to get there. So, I wish more people were doing this. Many of the time management books encourage you to do a diary study or write down your time use. But what they don't do is they don't talk about where time is spent. I do because I've got that data and I can see where people need to be going and what their ideal profiles look like.
This is ultimately personal accountability and making sure that you use your time properly and efficiently can actually make you feel so much better about yourself overall. So I really enjoy, learning about these things. And once we start implementing time management and tools into our life to simplify, it does make a difference. Mark, it's always great to talk about this stuff. Is there anything that we've missed that you think we should highlight today?
Well, we haven't talked about how to do better, and I'll give people one terrific tip. Everyone knows that you should be writing a daily to do list. And if you don't, try it. Write on a post it note or back of an envelope or use an app or whatever you want to do, but create a to do list. Here's how I differ from others in that I tell people start with a blank slate. You've got nothing to do today, no emails, no meetings, nothing, or at least pretend as if you didn't. And ask yourself, if I had nothing to do today, what would I do to affect my results a month from now? I'll repeat that. If I had nothing to do today, what would I do to affect my results a month from now? Well, that salespeople would make some sales calls. The manager would do some performance reviews or introduce that, get that new project moving. The engineer would be doing some design work and so on. Okay, those are things that affect your long-term goals. And so those are your highest priority activities. And you should write down the things you can actually complete today. For a manager who wants to hire a new employee, you can't do all that in one day, but you can, review the job description, or you can put it up on a website, or you can do some interviews. So what can I complete today? And then at the end of the day, you can check those off and say, yep, got those done. So those are your highest priority activities, the things that affect your results a month from now. Put those first on your to-do list, and then fill in all the other stuff, and make time for the priorities first. Maybe that's early in the morning. Maybe you block off time during the day between 11 and 1 o'clock or something like that. Those are going to be 20% of your time. We know that. So you've got to make sure that that time is available to do those high priority tasks, and let the other stuff fill in later. So start with those first. That's my tip for how to organize yourself and do a to-do list when you're overwhelmed by all these tasks that come your way.
Mark, you've got people excited. You're loaded with information. So could you tell people how to get a hold of you and how they can work with you?
As I said, or you said, the simplest way is through my website, getmoredone.com. So it's Mark at getmoredone.com. Just remember, Get More Done. There's a contact page there. And lately, I've been saying, if somebody wanted just a consultation, I'm not a coach as such, but if somebody wanted a quick coaching session, I'll do that pro bono, just to help people out. And then if you think you want to use the TimeCorder device, I'm actually sponsoring a study of female women executives who are managing large departments and so on. And they don't pay for that, because I want to present that data at an upcoming conference. So I'm looking for senior female executives. If someone else just wants a phone call, happy to share some tips with you in a quick coaching session without turning on the meter and the dollar sign, and not trying to upsell you on anything else. I'm just passionate about doing this stuff and want to help people where I can. And if somebody wants to hire me after that, then they can.
You can see that you're passionate about what you do, Mark, and that's always someone that you should be thrilled to get a hold of and work with. So I appreciate what you do, and I surely appreciate you sharing it here today with us on the podcast.
Great speaking with you, Ed.
Thank you for joining us today. If you found this podcast enlightening, entertaining, educational in any way, please share, like, subscribe, and join us right back here next week for another great episode of the Dead America Podcast. I'm Ed Waters, your host. Enjoy your afternoon, wherever you might be.